The Fox News studio buzzed with anticipation, its bright lights reflecting off sleek panels as cameras adjusted to capture every angle of what producers had promised would be a headline-making debate. On one side sat Jessica Tarlov, a polished liberal commentator known for her sharp tongue and unwavering defense of progressive policies. With a confident smile and a stack of notes in front of her, she projected the air of someone ready to dismantle her opponent. Opposite her was Governor Greg Abbott, the Texas Republican whose presence carried the weight of hard-won battles and unshakable resolve. Dressed in a tailored suit, his calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the intensity radiating from Tarlov. He didn't shuffle papers or lean on rehearsed soundbites, his hands rested firmly on the desk, his focus unbroken. The moderator, a veteran anchor, opened with a sweeping introduction. "Tonight, we bring you a clash of two visions. Jessica Tarlov, representing progressive commentary, and Governor Greg Abbott, the voice of Texas conservatism. The question, what kind of leadership does America need in this moment of division?" The audience, divided between conservatives and liberals, leaned forward. This wasn't going to be another polite panel exchange. It was a collision, two worldviews destined to erupt under the studio lights. Jessica's eyes glimmered with certainty. Abbott's gaze was steady, unyielding. The bell had rung, and the first round was about to begin. The moderator wasted no time. His opening question cut straight to the heart of the nation's divide. "Governor Abbott, Ms. Tarlov, how should America balance border security with compassion for immigrants?" Jessica leaned forward instantly, her voice crisp and confident. "Governor Abbott represents a politics of fear," she declared. "He builds walls, literal and figurative, while ignoring the real stories of families seeking a better life. America is a nation of immigrants, yet Abbott treats people as problems instead of humans. His approach isn't leadership, it's cruelty wrapped in rhetoric." Applause broke from her supporters, the studio echoing with approval. She smirked, her tone sharp, her gaze fixed on Abbott like a challenge. To many, it looked like she had scored the first blow. But Abbott didn't flinch. He adjusted his microphone and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Jessica, you speak about compassion as if it exists without consequences. But ask the ranchers in Texas whose land is trampled, ask the mothers whose children have died from fentanyl smuggled across the border. Compassion without security is chaos. And Texas will not trade safety for slogans." The crowd erupted, half with cheers, half with jeers. Abbott's voice cut through the noise, calm yet unshakable. "You call it cruelty. I call it responsibility. Leadership means facing the hard truths, even when they don't fit neatly into sound bites." Jessica's smirk faded slightly as Abbott's words hung in the air. The first strike had been thrown, and the lesson had begun. Jessica wasn't about to let Abbott's words stand uncontested. She leaned forward, her voice sharper now, her finger tapping against the desk for emphasis. "Governor, you keep pointing to fear-driven examples, but the data tells a different story. Immigrants contribute billions to our economy, they fill essential jobs, and they enrich our communities. You make them scapegoats for every problem. That's not responsibility, that's politics at its ugliest." Her supporters clapped, some even stood, energized by her passion. The moderator tried to calm the crowd, but the energy was shifting. Jessica sensed it and pressed harder. "You talk about families hurt by drugs, but you don't mention that most fentanyl seizures happen at legal ports of entry. That's not on desperate migrants, it's on failed federal coordination. If anything, your state-first stunts distract from real solutions." For a moment, it seemed she had trapped Abbott in a corner. The studio buzzed with murmurs. The camera zoomed in on Abbott's face, waiting for a crack in his calm. But instead, Abbott leaned forward, his voice steady, his eyes locked on Jessica. "Jessica, you're right, immigrants do strengthen America. But there's a difference between legal immigration and lawlessness. Texans know that difference. They live it every day. And while you quote numbers, I'm looking at the faces of mothers who've buried children. Are you going to tell them it's just a statistic? Because I won't. The words cut deep. Silence filled the air for a moment, even among some of Jessica's supporters. Abbott had shifted the focus from charts to people, from theory to reality. Jessica's lips tightened, her confidence dented. What began as a debate was starting to feel like something else entirely, a lesson Abbott was intent on teaching. The moderator raised his hand, but Abbott didn't wait for the calm to fully settle. His tone sharpened, though his composure remained. Jessica, you've perfected the art of studio debates. Charts, studies, carefully worded sound bites. But in Texas, it's not abstract. It's ranchers finding bodies on their land. It's small-town hospitals overwhelmed. It's taxpayers footing the bill while Washington shrugs. You call that politics? I call it survival. The conservative half of the audience exploded, their applause shaking the room. Jessica, unfazed, smiled thinly. Governor, survival is ensuring America remains the land of opportunity. You talk about law and order, but what about compassion? What about the millions who dream of building lives here? Are they all threats in your eyes? Abbott didn't hesitate. He leaned forward, his voice lowering, forcing the audience to lean in with him. No, Jessica. They're not all threats. But when government fails to draw a line, everyone pays the price. Texans have seen the chaos. They've seen what happens when leaders trade real solutions for TV appearances. And that's the difference: you debate, I act. The words hit like a hammer. Even the moderator seemed stunned, shifting uncomfortably as the tension between the two reached a boiling point. Jessica's jaw tightened, but before she could retort, Abbott continued, his voice firm and final. You wanted a debate, Jessica. But tonight, I'm not here to debate. I'm here to show America what leadership looks like. Gasps rippled through the studio. The lesson had shifted from policy to principle, and Abbott was holding the chalk. Jessica's eyes narrowed. The smile that once signaled confidence now looked like defiance masking frustration. She leaned in, her voice raised, determined to take back control of the moment. Governor, you're twisting this into a performance. You talk about acting, but your so-called actions have cost Texas millions in taxpayer money. Your border stunts don't fix the problem, they just feed headlines. If that's leadership, then Texas deserves better. Her supporters erupted with applause, clapping loudly as if to drown out Abbott's momentum. The studio pulsed with tension, one half of the crowd cheering, the other booing. The moderator struggled to restore order, but the clash had already grown bigger than his gavel. Abbott waited, letting the noise die down. Then, with a calm tone that cut deeper than a shout, he answered. Jessica, I don't govern for studio applause. I govern for results. When Texans feel safer, when communities hold together, when the line is drawn against chaos, that's not a stunt. That's leadership. And if Washington had done its job, Texas wouldn't have to carry the burden alone. He paused, scanning the crowd, his gaze unflinching. You call it costly. I call it priceless. Because no price is too high for protecting families. The words landed heavy, and for a moment, even some in Jessica's camp hesitated. The studio's air crackled like a storm about to break. Jessica clenched her notes, her rebuttal ready, but it was clear Abbott wasn't just responding anymore. He was taking control, reshaping the debate into something she hadn't signed up for. This wasn't about trading points. It was about dominance. And the crowd could feel it. Jessica straightened her papers, her voice rising with urgency as she fought to regain control of the narrative. Governor, you talk about protecting families, but your policies divide them. You've turned Texas into a testing ground for partisan theatrics while ignoring the humanitarian crisis at the border. The America I believe in doesn't shut its doors, it builds bridges. And your Texas? It's closing itself off. Her words landed like a sharp blade, drawing cheers from her side of the audience. She looked pleased, believing she had struck at the core of Abbott's image. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the confidence on her face. Abbott, however, didn't blink. He leaned back in his chair, then forward slowly, speaking with the weight of a man who had heard these arguments before and had lived through the realities they ignored. Jessica, you call it a bridge. Texans call it a flood. You talk about unity, but you don't live with the consequences. You sit in a studio while my people live on the front lines. Ranchers bury livestock. Families lock their doors at night. And while you talk about ideals, Texas is paying the price for Washington's neglect. He paused just long enough to let silence settle like a hammer. The moderator glanced nervously at the clock, but the audience was locked in, caught between two visions of America. Abbott's voice grew stronger, each word precise. You said this is about division. You're right. The division isn't caused by Texas, it's caused by leaders who preach compassion but abandon responsibility. That's the lesson here, Jessica. A nation without order cannot survive long enough to show compassion. Gasps rippled across the studio. Even some who clapped for Tarlov earlier shifted uncomfortably. The momentum, once in her hands, was slipping away. This wasn't just a debate anymore. Abbott was turning it into a reckoning. Jessica gripped the edge of the desk, her voice quickening as if speed could outpace Abbott's calm precision. Governor, you keep painting this picture of Texas as some war zone, but the truth is, you exaggerate to justify your policies. You build fear to consolidate power. You claim compassion is weakness, but compassion is what made America strong. Without it, your version of leadership is nothing but cold calculation. Her words landed like arrows, and her supporters erupted once again, standing and clapping as she pushed forward. You can talk about survival all you want, but without empathy, survival turns into tyranny. That's what you're missing, Governor. That's why your Texas model can't work for the rest of America. Abbott didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He waited for the applause to fade, then leaned slightly toward the microphone, his eyes never leaving hers. Jessica, you say I exaggerate. Tell that to the Texas sheriffs patrolling with limited resources. Tell that to the hospitals overwhelmed with cases Washington refuses to manage. You think this is about consolidating power? No. It's about protecting people when others won't. The studio grew quieter, as if the weight of his words settled on everyone at once. Abbott's tone sharpened, but his calm remained. You call my leadership cold. But Jessica, what's colder, acknowledging hard truths and acting on them, or standing in a studio, reciting ideals while real families suffer? Compassion without action is a hollow promise. And Texans don't live on promises. They live on results. The crowd broke into thunderous applause, many rising to their feet. Jessica's jaw clenched, her eyes darting to the moderator, who seemed reluctant to intervene. For the first time, she looked less like a confident debater and more like someone realizing the floor beneath her was shifting. Jessica inhaled deeply, trying to steady her voice. She knew she had to strike differently, to pivot the battle away from Abbott's steady, fact-heavy rhythm. Governor, let's be honest, she said, her tone laced with condescension. You love painting yourself as the lone sheriff of Texas, but what you really do is undermine national unity. You turn states against each other. You weaken America by pushing division, and one day, even Texans will see that your so-called strength is nothing more than stubbornness. The jab was personal. Her words were meant not just to challenge Abbott's policies but to question his character. A murmur swept through the audience, some gasping, others leaning in as if waiting for a thunderclap. Abbott, however, didn't flinch. He let her words hang for a long, uncomfortable moment, then spoke with deliberate calm. Jessica, I'll tell you what weakens America, it's leaders who confuse speeches with solutions. It's commentators who lecture from a studio, safe from the realities on the ground. Texans don't call that unity. They call it neglect. His eyes locked on hers, unwavering. You think stubbornness is a flaw? Let me explain something. Stubbornness built this nation. Stubbornness fought wars, built railroads, and defended freedom when others said it couldn't be done. If you want to call that stubbornness, fine. In Texas, we call it courage. The crowd erupted, chants of Abbott. Abbott, ringing through the studio. Jessica's smirk faltered, her strategy slipping through her fingers. For the first time, it was clear, she thought this was just a debate. Abbott had turned it into a lesson, one that was leaving her visibly shaken. Jessica straightened in her chair, her voice louder now, tinged with desperation. Governor Abbott, you're not teaching anyone a lesson, you're dodging accountability. Texans suffer under your leadership, and you spin stories to mask your failures. You claim courage, but what you're really doing is clinging to outdated politics. America doesn't need stubbornness, it needs progress. And your so-called Texas model? It's dragging this country backward. Her words came fast, almost breathless, as if sheer force could pierce Abbott's armor. The progressive side of the audience erupted in applause, standing to cheer her defiance. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Jessica's fiery energy, her conviction shining like a last stand. But Abbott didn't rise to her volume. He waited, still and patient, until the cheers quieted. Then, in a tone that cut sharper than any shout, he delivered his counter. Jessica, if progress means ignoring reality, then Texans will proudly reject it. You call it backward, I call it rooted. Rooted in responsibility, in faith, in defending families. You call me outdated. Yet when the lights go out and chaos comes, it's the principles you mock that hold people together. The conservative half of the audience roared, stomping their feet, their chants drowning out the lingering claps from Jessica's camp. Abbott leaned forward, his eyes steady, his voice rising just enough to fill the room. You thought this was a debate. But America is watching. And what they see isn't two equal arguments. They see one side clinging to applause, and another standing for truth. That's the lesson here. And Jessica, whether you accept it or not, you're the one being schooled. Gasps rippled across the studio. Jessica froze, her smirk gone, her pen still in her hand but unmoving. The debate had shifted completely, Abbott's calm had swallowed her fury whole. The studio air was thick, heavy with the weight of everything said. Jessica shuffled her notes, her earlier confidence drained into silence. For the first time, her gaze faltered, darting toward the moderator as if searching for a lifeline. But the cameras were relentless, zoomed in on the two figures locked in a battle that was no longer just about policy. Abbott leaned forward, his voice calm but firm, his words carrying the finality of a gavel striking wood. Jessica, you came here expecting a debate of talking points. But leadership isn't about clever lines. It's about standing firm when it matters most. Texas doesn't wait for Washington to act. We lead. And when you confuse speeches for solutions, the people who suffer aren't sitting in this studio, they're out there, living with the consequences. He paused, letting the silence expand, drawing in the eyes and ears of everyone in the room. His tone dropped lower, steady as stone. You thought this was a debate. But tonight, America learned, it was a lesson. And the lesson is simple, Texas doesn't bow. Texas stands. The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in stunned silence. Some rose to their feet, others shook their heads, but no one could deny the momentum had shifted entirely. Jessica sat frozen, her pen idle, her arguments dissolved into echoes. The moderator, visibly rattled, cleared his throat. We'll, take a break. But the story had already been written. Abbott hadn't just defended himself. He had seized the night, leaving Jessica Tarlov in the shadow of his resolve. As the cameras panned out, one thing was clear, this wasn't the debate Jessica had imagined. It was a masterclass, and Abbott had owned every moment. As the debate lights dimmed and the echoes of the crowd faded, one truth remained clear: Jessica Tarlov walked into the studio expecting a debate. What she faced instead was a lesson in resilience, in clarity, and in leadership. Governor Greg Abbott didn't just answer questions. He reframed the night. With calm precision, he dismantled rhetoric, replacing it with reality. Where Tarlov brought soundbites, Abbott brought stories. Where she pressed with fury, he responded with steadiness. And in that contrast, the audience saw more than disagreement, they saw dominance. The final takeaway was simple: Abbott proved that leadership is not about who can speak the loudest, but who can stand the strongest. For those watching across America, the night became more than a clash of ideas. It became a defining moment where one voice rose above the noise.